I'm not one to condense my sessions down. We're running over. There's lunch between you and me. So I'm super mindful to get to the point and get with it. For those of you who don't know us, so employee benefits consultancy, advising clients of all shapes and sizes on the entirety of their reward, benefits and wellbeing programs. But you can find out more about that when you come see us at the stand. For today, REBA always love to set me a challenging topic to talk about. So I'm going to try and use my crystal ball and look at what we think benefits are going to look like to the 2030s. I was kind of looking at it this way when I started out my thinking for this one. Are we heading towards a dystopian future? Something Orwellian? Or are we heading towards something that looks much more like, I'm not sure, maybe Asgard, if there's any Avengers fans in the room, but more of a utopia. Something's for certain, with all of the various mini crises that have come together to form one massive crisis in the world of work, well-being, and health in the UK, we've got some pretty big decisions to make, which are going to determine which direction this heads in. I'm going to take us through 7 major themes. I'm always mindful coming to a REBA Future Forum to maybe try and think about something innovative or something clever or creative. You've probably heard that from many other people today, far more eloquent than me to talk about it. So instead, I'm just going to focus on the big thematic things happening in reward and benefits and what the outlook looks like, and some pretty fundamental stuff. So let's see how we go. Let's say this theme of the crossroads I think we're at. One of my bosses, former bosses, always used to say to me, if you're not solving a problem, then you're probably just creating hot air. I think that's a very fair statement to make. So with each of these, I'm going to start with the problem as we see it today. The retirement landscape needs to change fundamentally in the UK. There'll be some of you in the room, employers in certain sectors who offer 10, 12, 15% non-contributory pensions to your employees. Congratulations if that's you. You're doing wonderful things for your people, but that is by far from the majority. In fact, that is the very small minority. Most of them work within probably a minute's walk of this building. Indeed. Congratulations if that's you. Look, the truth is auto-enrollment has pushed now nearly 20 million savers into retirement. That's absolutely fantastic. As a net total, not new. There's supposedly about 32 million of us in the workforce, so there is some way to go potentially. But there's no doubt that auto-enrollment, or at least this first phase of it, is seen as a resounding success. The challenge is, and I've quoted my source in the top right-hand corner each time you want to know where I get my made-up statistics from. The Pension and Lifetime Savings Association, in conjunction with Aviva and REBA, I believe, did some research recently suggesting that 62% of us are heading for poverty in retirement, essentially. We're not going to meet our replacement income requirements. That is particularly acute right now for one simple reason. We're coming out of a workforce that is currently retiring with at least partial defined benefit into a world where our retirees are relying entirely on defined contribution. In a world in which the government only mandated, firstly, a switch from DB to DC of only 6% from the employer. For those of you who've gone through that transition before, you know your legal requirement was 6%, right? To then into auto-enrollment, currently at 3% for the employer, we've created, as I'll call them later, a nation of zombie savers who don't know, or maybe don't care, that they're heading towards a bad retirement outcome. The good news is that there are consultation and proposals from many industry bodies and lobbyists saying that we all obviously know that is not enough. Our dystopian future is that we ignore that. As employers, particularly when it comes to small and medium enterprises, the cost of putting 3% into our operating costs is a challenge. Needless to say, in the current economic environment, 3% on your cost base means inflation in products and services, which is exactly the thing that we're trying to prevent economically right now. So these things are really at odds with each other. But fundamentally, the current timeline proposed in the consultation is to move to 6% and 6%. If you didn't know it, 12% as a combined funding rate is seen to get retirement adequacy. So if you do the maths for the average earner in the UK, looking to achieve the Pension Lifetimes Association's comfortable state of living in retirement, 12% is your target. There's no doubt it needs to move to there. Other countries that are ahead of us in automatic enrollment are already there. It's the right thing to do, but the pressure on it is the economic climate that we're in. But Going ahead to 10 years from now, as is the topic of my session today, there's no doubt we could see a scenario in which the employers that aren't in the vicinity of this building offering generous non-contributory schemes are going to be compelled to push to 6 and 6. Of course, then, the challenge is what starts to look competitive? Is it 8 and 6? Is it 9 and 6? If you want to differentiate yourself, that high watermark is going to come up and up and up as it needs to. I personally don't want to see pensions to the point at which there's simply a hygiene factor, right, at which everyone does the arbitrary minimum, because if it's at 12% and we think people are tracking for a good retirement, we might see as enough and do no more than we need to do. So some big decisions lay ahead in the UK retirement landscape. I forgot that animated up. For those of you who can work out the approximate angle in that triangle, you'll note that there are 6 more to come. Let's see how we do. So the next macro trend is around healthcare. Again, if we look at this at a societal level, highest ever numbers on waiting lists. We're up to 8 million. God, I really am. I mean, you're laughing along, which is great, but this is all so negative today, isn't it? I apologize. 5% now, so about 400,000 people in the UK have waited 12 months or longer for their surgery in the UK. These are all, sadly, record numbers. Our belief of the trend that's going to happen over the next decade, and this is really, really critical, and we had a good broker-type debate over this at an event recently. My honest view with healthcare in the UK is we've hit a new plateau, right? We are never returning to those twinkle-eyed days of 20, 30 years ago when access to primary care was just available, when I went to my family doctor, to my GP, when I wanted, in my local town or village, right? We are never going to return to that state again, I believe. I think that many of these things are a little bit cyclical, but the way I kind of describe it, again, God, I'm picking the wrong analogy today, it's like global warming. The trend is sadly only in one direction, but you get seasonal highs and lows, right? We're going to see the same thing here. We'll see some corrective measures, but they're never going to take us back to where we were before. The challenge with that for all of us is that the private sector is going to have to carry the burden of that if we want to, right? And that's the big decision towards utopia or dystopia that's going to be asked of us. Are we going to carry that burden and make sure that we provide more universal healthcare options to our people? Or are we going to turn around and say, fundamentally, that's unaffordable, or we can't see that return on investment? There's 2 ways in which I think that burden is going to see further transformation within the healthcare industry. Number 1, the reliance on digital and telemedicine has to continue to progress. We don't have the scalable options in the infrastructure in the UK, either public or private, to actually give access to healthcare when people need it. If I know I've got a qualified doctor, whether they're in India, Europe, America, or elsewhere, that I've got access to when I need it, that is a trend that has to continue. Otherwise, we're never going to get through our backlogs. And of course, the first job of that backlog is simply to ensure that there's proper diagnosis, proper presentation, and proper triaging of what that patient requires. That is going to have to rely on digital medicine more. And the other thing that I think we're going to see over the next 10 years is more and more health tourism. It sounds far more flashy than it is. I don't mean a trip to Turkey that you pretend to holiday and you come back with lovely white teeth. Not that type of health tourism. I mean health tourism as in, it will be more affordable and more realistic for me to get elective care in Europe than it is in the UK. And that may well start to be insured or put within our healthcare trusts over the next decade. Again, if you look at the pledges and promises from government, and I say government, they're only going to be in power for what, 12 months at best, probably? But whatever that is, the pledges they're making today are all catch-up scenarios. None of them are returning us to a position that we've been in before. So your decision in this, as good employers, is are you going to bridge that gap, and can you afford to bridge that gap, and where are the right places to do so? But the healthcare landscape in the UK is going to look very, very different 10 years from now, and it's not because we're going to return to the days of being able to walk down to my private GP, or my, should I say, local GP. Third one, big macro trend that's happening in our landscape at the moment as well, is absence. You've guessed it, people, another doomsday stat for you here. It's at the highest level it's been in a decade. So on average, we're losing 8 days per person per year to absence. That's not new news, and that's not really the problem. My second statistic is the real problem. 63% of long-term absences are now cited as being caused by mental health. Now, if you think about that for a second, if a long-term condition is caused by something physical, right? If it's caused by a cancer, a heart, respiratory, pulmonary condition, whatever it is, the course of action, the remedial action, the restorative action to bring me back into work, if that's going to be a realistic option, is very, very clear, right? It's often a binary outcome. We do this, we put you through this triage care, this rehabilitative care, and you're back in the workplace. By comparison with mental health, what we're seeing is a real struggle with that return to work scenario. I'm sure you've all witnessed this yourselves, and not only are you struggling with the return to work scenario, you're struggling, I think personally, even more with the going off work scenario in the first place. That's been caused by a number of things. It's been caused by virtual and hybrid working. Is that person soldiering on through? Should we not instead turn around to them and say, check out for the week and I'll check in with you on Monday, but you need to rest, recuperate, what have you? Also, the workplace is causing more of these problems than ever before when it comes to burnout and other factors that we're seeing that culturally are very difficult to tackle, but are heading in one trajectory only. All of this comes, and some of you would have seen this in the autumn statement, that the government is naturally continued to tighten the belt. Under a Conservative government, they've made no bones about the idea that they want a Britain of workers, right? This has always been a huge part of their manifesto, the idea of if I can get you back to work and contributing, we're going to put our money and time and effort into that, as opposed to supporting you if you're off sick, need long-term care or otherwise. Now again, that might be a 12-month agenda as it stands, but the problem is that state benefits continue to fall behind, both in terms of their availability and their replacement levels of income. That was proved out in the autumn statement, near 12% addition to the national living wage, and less than 7% addition to state benefits. So we can see that huge disparity that they're quite happy creating, forcing, they would love to think encouraging, but forcing the concept of return to work, as they're doing in transforming fit-to-work practices as well, right? They want to find conditions in which they can say to somebody, you have to work, rather than we understand why you're long-term sick. That, again, is a landscape and trajectory that's only heading in one direction. You've got the same challenge to you there. This one's slightly different to the healthcare one, because for the healthcare one, you don't have the immediate responsibility for providing that service to your people, right? You need to triage and signpost them to a virtual GP service or a healthcare plan of some kind. That's your sole job if you're going to decide to do that. In this space, the job of occupational health, absence management, return to work programs, rehabilitation, so much more of that sits with you, even if you try and outsource it to a third-party provider. And the biggest challenge with that today, according to research, is that it sits with the employee line manager relationship, which is why so much of this is happening in the uncontrollable mental health space, as I call it. So again, for me, if we're going to see those statistics improve over the next decade, then we're going to have to be in a position where we fundamentally change our ability to assess and support a potential absentee from work. If they go off, then ultimately that pattern of getting them to return to work when it's a mental health case is looking less successful than it historically has when it's been about physical well-being or physical health. Mindful, I've got 6 minutes. How long did the other guy go over for, do you reckon? Like, I know lunch is outside, but we'll see how we go. Next macro trend, talk about is well-being. Again, according to the ONS, they have, if you don't know, they have a health and well-being dashboard for the United Kingdom. Anyone seen that, know that? Awesome, that's wicked. Fascinating read. I'm a total geek, but absolutely fascinating read when you see what's going up, down, and staying sideways. But again, on a depressing trend, now a quarter of the UK adult population cite near constant pandemic of both depression and or anxiety happening day to day for them. Of course, that is a very broad spectrum of what it means. I don't think that all of them would be clinically diagnosed as either anxious or depressed, but needless to say that it's something that's been exacerbated most recently by the cost of living crisis and that relationship between money worries and other forms of stress that also, again, lead to absence, as I've talked about. My big thing in the well-being space with where are we going with this, what's the next decade going to look like, is quite simple. Are there any well-being providers in the room who've kind of snuck in and just wanted to hear what I had to say? Brilliant. I'm going to let you into my point of view on this and not offend too many people then. It's obviously up there. It's a massively cluttered space, right? We've got clients with 40-odd solutions or resources, because they turned around and went, oh gosh, COVID and the pandemic, that did all sorts of problems for mental well-being. EAP's not enough, let's find the next 4 things to put in place. Then with the cost of living crisis, we've gone, and again, there's some great brands here, not necessarily all my opinions of my own, but a nudge, great at financial well-being potentially. But again, they've only been part of the solution. And so the next one's been added, and the next one's been added, or there's a little bit of it over here. My honest view with this is that I think it's less your fault. I think it's more the market's fault has not rationalized, has not developed further enough to give you a gateway or a point solution. My view is employees shouldn't have to be searching around 40 different resources in order to get the answer. We're going to see 2 big things in the market, I hope, over the next decade: consolidation and rationalization. For all of you that are thinking fertility and female health at the moment, it's fascinating that at the last REBA Wellbeing Congress, there was a host of different brands and providers and names here to today. Next year, it will change again, right? We need to see consolidation in the market, and we need to see simplification. I very sadly missed what sounded like a brilliant talk on generative AI this morning. The keynote, people have been saying was amazing. This is the other big thing. The technology needs to improve, right? We need to be in a position where we can say to people, if you interface with this thing, your sole job is to tell them what you think you need, and it guides you to your pathway from there. Right? If you give an application, I have to have either the expertise or the inclination to go searching for it myself. So not only do I have to pick between 40 resources, I also have to get to the right one and navigate my own way around it. So for me, the leading providers in this market are already starting to think about the application of AI, and it needs to be solved in one way for me, which is give me the lowest possible barrier to finding what I need. If we don't tackle that, I don't think we're going to tackle these statistics in the next decade. Next big thing is personalization. This is a fascinating one. Our research with REBA on benefits strategy and design, everyone's seen that? Read it? Next to, on the bedside table at night, I will sign them personally for you if you like. I know, it's like my Bible. Interestingly, 80% of you said that personalization is one of the top 3 things on the agenda for the next 3 years at least, in terms of your benefit strategies. Now, I kind of sit there and go, I'm not even sure what the hell I mean by that, let alone you lot. So if any of you think you've got a slick definition of it, great. However, I'll tell you what I think goes wrong with it at the moment. Whether it's flex, that we like to call personalization, and indeed we use it in a well-being context as well. My view is we now offer too much choice to our people, right? We've not gone back to the real fundamentals, and I always say this to clients, of what makes a benefit, right? And the key to that is what makes it compelling to offer in the workplace. Is it cheaper? Are there better terms, like better insurability terms? Is there a tax advantage? Is it simply more convenient? Do I get a level of personal service alongside buying a product? But whatever it is, I think we've kind of gone, let's add the next thing on and the next thing on, whilst keeping all of the things that have a 2% take-up and no measure of value. I hear so many clients talk about personalization. For me, it is not about how much choice we offer. It's about deciding the fundamental needs that we want to support for our people and how we help them understand their own situation and make an informed decision. I'll give you the classic example. Take life cover. How many of you in the room have Flex? Keep your hand up if you've got Flex life assurance within Flex. How many of you give employees either a tool or any information to work out how much life cover I need? I'm glad you put your hands down because it doesn't exist, right? If you've got a financial advisor or a wealth manager, they'll turn around and go, right, what are your assets? What are your liabilities? What's your situation with regards to family and dependent children? Where's your mortgage at? What do you hope for them for the future? Then they might, if they're clever, look at your pension and other things and go, remember, that's tax-free life cover. Your net amount you need is £500,000. We never do that when we say to people, here's Flex life cover in the workplace. Personalization is about helping people make better decisions on the fundamentals that it's worthwhile offering them in the workplace. Again, my 10 years from now, I'm conscious I've kind of got 35 seconds. Let's give a bit of leeway because we're at number 5 of 7. That fork in the road, we have to go, right, we're not going to keep offering more choice. We're going to refine down the choice to where there's value, and personalization has to mean helping people make informed decisions. Technology. I'm going to skip through this one a little bit. My tenuous link here is that Sage did some wonderful research. 92% of Gen Y and Gen Z said that one of their top 3 criteria for joining a company is flexibility. right? And it's fascinating. When I interview people in that position nowadays, I'm like, that's what motivates you? I'm going to have a tough job with you. But the point is, we need better technology if we're going to have this work anywhere, anytime, on-demand scenario. That's not particularly new. However, the point is, if we look at this not through a well-being or a flex lens, but through an employee experience lens, I don't think anyone, I'd love it if there's an honest hand in the room, that we deliver that employee experience piece well today. Right? So if we're recognizing the fact we have a distributed or remote workforce, how successful are we actually going to be in terms of connecting them with these things? I think we should have a more human-led approach to so much of well-being and benefits, but fundamentally, if we're going to have a remote, hybrid, distributed workforce, technology has to play the right role. And today, what I tend to find is that our core HR application does not give a good employee experience, let alone all the satellite product services and things we have around it being well connected and leading me to that. We talk so much about employee experience, all of us, right? None of us that I've seen truly are getting it right today. So again, if we want to support future generations who will become, Gen Y are kind of our managers today, right? Gen Z are our future leaders of our business. If we're going to respond to them and give them the experience that they want, it has to be grounded in technology. It is not there yet. Number 7, outcomes. I think we've gone on a fascinating journey with benefits over the last, I'm going to say 30 years. I know I look like I'm fresh out of school, but I've been doing it for 22 of those 30 years. And we've gone from benefits being centered on reward, right? It's about how much I give you. It's what your worth is. Are you talent? Am I going to give you more? Into choice and all about the individual. Flex in the kind of noughties provided that huge gap in value that employees weren't seeing in their benefits programs as we came out of defined benefit. It's then all been defined by well-being. And that's great because we're kind of recognizing we're in a bit of a well-being crisis, but also we're focusing more on the problem rather than just jumping straight to the solution. And any of you today that couch your benefits program within the context of well-being, I think are ahead of others and is the right way to go. But my question to myself is, where is the next evolution on this? And the next evolution is on productivity, right? It is on actual business performance. All of us as reward professionals, HR professionals in the room, we kind of wanted that seat at the top table. And for me, the really big thing is be able to turn around and going, the initiatives that I own on behalf of the business have a material impact on the business outcome. Today, I don't think we make that causal link well. So at the same time that our employees aren't really engaging with the 40 different initiatives we put in front of them, so none of them are leading us to demonstrate the value they're having towards the business goal. Those of you who are going to be most successful at this in the next decade are going to take the jump from well-being as an employee-centered idea of, am I looking after you, into productivity. By looking after the employee, can I demonstrate the causal impact on customer outcomes and business outcomes? That's going to take some very brave conversations about the way we talk to our employees and how we gather data on their performance and link it to the things that we do. But if we think about the fact that benefits have moved, or benefits, like 4 or 5 tangible products, like a life cover, a healthcare, a pension, have moved towards resources and tools and experience with well-being. So I think the next evolution of it will have to move into measurement. How well are you today? What can I do to influence it? What's the next gap that doesn't just hypothetically tick a box from one of the suppliers out there, but materially has a relationship to the productivity and performance of the workforce? We're almost there. 3.5 minutes over. Let's get out of here, people. It's warm. Don't know why I've got 3 layers on today. This was crazy. You're still with me. I like that. Thank you. So we have a choice to make, right? The big thing I want us to think about as we go into the next decade of what we're all doing here is we have a choice. We head towards dystopia, as I've called it. We will have zombie savers heading towards a nightmare in retirement, right? You might be at the 15% non-contributory end of the spectrum. Congratulations, you're probably not. Secondly, health and absence will continue to worsen. The stresses and pressures of both work and daily life, as we're trying to squeeze out more profits from our people and do more with less, as is the nature of all businesses, particularly when we don't have our technology and our efficiencies sorted, is going to worsen unless it's addressed. I think that gets addressed in the most important relationship in your business, which is between your line managers and their employees. Then, moving on to avoiding the challenges of mental and financial well-being. I think a lot of us bury our head in the sands. If there's any law firms in the room, the number of our legal clients who will address well-being like it's a problem for the individual outside of work as opposed to I want 2,000 billable hours, and how's that impacting your well-being culturally? We have to close that gap. We're afraid to talk about it. If we do, we're heading in the wrong direction. Final thing on here, we just don't get traction with initiatives, right? If you took an honest look at your landscape today and went, do any of them contain the level of engagement and ROI I want? I think you'd start wiping the slate clean. I think we're afraid to take things away. I think we need to be much better at trial and error if we're going to have success. And go, yeah, we trialed an initiative. It tanked. That's okay. We'll find the next one. I mean, you can't do that with your pension, right? There's some things that are too big to like trial and error with. But in terms of this culture of well-being and performance, the little stuff we want to make a difference with, trial and error. Let's feel confident making simple and quick mistakes when we need to. Or utopia. Here's where I think in the next decade we need to head towards. Employers need to embrace and sponsor any government initiative to push better retirement saving outcomes. That extra 3%, we have to find a way to fund that if we're in that camp. Democratizing access, particularly to primary care, right? We need to be in a position where if the NHS has reached a new plateau that's never going to return to the halcyon days of the past, that's going to end up being our responsibility or no one's. And all those other things around absence and well-being will continue to tank. Overall, my big thing on experience and well-being in technology, we have too much today, right? I think it has its place, but I think it needs to be rationalized down. I think the market needs to support all of you in rationalizing it down and consolidating it and making it easier. But also, I think we need to take a long, hard look at things and go, if I've got 40 resource and applications, that needs to be 10, then it needs to be 5, right? We need to start getting rid of stuff, not adding more. And then ultimately, the big thing that I think we want to be doing if we're going to make everything else here successful, measure employee sentiment, measure employee needs and behaviors, and sit that alongside what the business can prove, right? Chief People Officer, COO, and MD, or Chief Commercial Officer at the table, they should be able to talk about the causal link between growth, customers, and people. Our route to that is through focusing on performance-led well-being and benefits, not just thinking that it's about the individual. 7 minutes over. I know you want to stay for questions. That'll have to be another time. Please come to the stand. I'd love to talk to you all. Thank you for staying with me. It's been awesome.